Ghostly legends are filled with numerous accounts of eerie and tragic events, often involving individuals who've disrespected or disturbed someone's final resting place. Such stories are common in many cultures, often reflecting deeper societal fears coupled with a glaring lack of morality. In this next story, the legend underscores themes of vengeance and retribution connected to the supernatural, all of which fall into the realm of the extremely strange. The legend of Carl Pruitt is one of the many ghost stories that have persisted in American folklore, particularly in the Appalachian region. The tale of Carl Pruitt, often referred to as the ghost of Carl Pruitt, is a chilling story about a vengeful spirit that supposedly wreaked havoc in the small town of Pulaski County, Kentucky in the early 20th century. According to the tale that has been passed down through generations, Carl Pruitt lived in Pulaski County, but little is known about his early life, as most records focused on the events surrounding his death. He was described as an ordinary man living a relatively unremarkable life until a tragic and violent event transformed him into a legendary figure. The story begins in 1938. Accounts say that Carl became enraged when he discovered his wife in bed with another man. The male suitor jumped out a window and ran to safety, while Carl, in a fit of fury, strangled his wife with a chain before taking his own life in the same manner. The murder-suicide left a deep scar on the community, and almost from the moment he was buried, the strange occurrences that were connected to and around his gravesite gave claim to the grave being cursed, as over the next several years, numerous individuals who attempted to desecrate Pruitt's grave met with untimely and often bizarre deaths. Mere weeks after he was buried in a separate cemetery from his wife, as family insisted, visitors noticed a pattern of a chain was slowly forming on Pruitt's gravestone. The chain was the product of an unusual discoloration in the stone, and over time the number of links increased until it formed the shape of a cross. At that point, a number of local residents suggested that the weirdly marked tombstone be removed from the graveyard and destroyed. But local officials didn't take the request seriously, and nothing more was done. One of the earliest and most famous incidents involved a young boy named James Collins. The story goes that around a month after the chain ceased to grow, James and some of his friends were playing near the cemetery where Carl Pruitt was buried. For reasons unknown, he decided to throw a rock at Pruitt's tombstone, chipping it slightly. On his way home while riding his bicycle, the boy lost control when the bicycle suddenly began to pick up speed, veered off the road, and collided with a tree. The bicycle chain somehow came loose, wrapped around James' neck, and strangled him to death. Locals were quick to link the bizarre accident to his act of disrespect toward Pruitt's final resting place, particularly when no chip or mark could be found on the tombstone afterwards, despite the other boys' insistence they saw the whole incident unfold. This marked the beginning of a series of eerie and fatal events connected to the grave of Carl Pruitt. In the late 1930s, a group of young men decided to test the legend for themselves. They went to the cemetery one evening, mocking the tale and throwing stones at his tombstone. On their way home, they were involved in a car accident. Their vehicle skidded off the road and crashed into a fence, and one of the men, David Hall, was decapitated in the accident, with a chain from the fence wrapped around his neck. The other men survived, but were deeply traumatized, convinced that the curse had claimed another victim. A few years later, a local woman named Mildred Parker decided to take her children to visit the cemetery, dismissing the legend as superstitious nonsense. During their visit, her children began playing near Pruitt's grave, and Mildred scolded them. That evening, while hanging laundry, she was found dead in her backyard, strangled by her own clothesline. Her husband discovered her body, and the community was once again gruesomely reminded of the purported curse. Then one day, a farmer drove his wagon and horses through the cemetery, and in a show of bravado, decided to take pot shots at the gravestone with his revolver. Stone chippings flew up and spooked the horses, who bolted. Family members traveling with the farmer managed to leap to safety, but the farmer hung on, trying to calm the horses. As the wagon hit a bump in the road, he was thrown off and became entangled in the trace chain and eventually strangled by it. Yet again, the damaged gravestone seemingly healed itself. A cemetery caretaker named Thomas Jenkins, who had always been skeptical of the ghost stories, decided to clean Pruitt's tombstone one afternoon. While he was doing so, he felt an unexplainable chill and an overwhelming sense of dread. Later that night, Thomas was found dead in his home, strangled by his own belt. The circumstances of his death were eerily similar to the other incidents, reinforcing the belief in the ghost of Carl Pruitt. Following these incidents, a number of people pressured their local congressman to address the homicidal tombstone. As a result, 2 policemen were dispatched to the cemetery to investigate. Neither believed the stories as any more than nonsense or vivid imaginations, so as they took photos of the grave, they openly chuckled about the whole situation as they returned to their squad car and headed back into town. Then suddenly one of them looked in the rearview mirror and saw a ball of light shooting out of the cemetery in their direction at a high rate of speed. The policeman driving gunned the engine, but the anomalous light gained on them. During the chase, the police car swerved off the road and crashed between 2 posts. The policeman in the passenger seat was thrown clear of the car, and when he unsteadily got to his feet, he began to search for his partner. It was then he discovered his broken body lying on the ground. It soon became clear that a chain linking the 2 posts together had shattered the windshield of the car and practically decapitated his partner. The final tragic event occurred several months after the policeman's death, when a farmer named Arthur Lewis, who lived near the cemetery, heard about the string of deaths and decided to take matters into his own hands. He went to Pruitt's grave with a hammer, intent on destroying the tombstone. Neighbors could hear Lewis as he beat on it. The next day, Arthur was found dead in his field, strangled by his own horse's reins. The horse was found grazing nearby, seemingly undisturbed. Inspection of the gravestone showed it to be in pristine shape with no signs of damage. The cause of Arthur's death was widely attributed as another challenge to the curse of, yes, Carl Pruitt. So as we can plainly see, the hauntings attributed to Pruitt's ghost often follow a distinct pattern. Each incident begins with someone disrespecting or disturbing his grave or tombstone. The victims usually found strangled, often by an object that seems to mimic the chain used in Pruitt's murder-suicide, and the fatal events typically occurring shortly following the act of disrespect, reinforcing the belief in the grave's curse. And the fatal events typically occurring shortly following the act of disrespect, reinforcing the belief in the grave's curse. The story has also had a significant impact on local folklore by serving as a cautionary tale about respecting the dead and the potential consequences of disturbing their rest. It can also be analyzed from a psychological standpoint, as the story represents collective fears and anxieties about death and the afterlife. It may also reflect the human tendency to seek explanations for unexplained tragedies by attributing them to supernatural forces. It also has shared similarities with other ghost stories and legends around the world, because the concept of a vengeful spirit seeking retribution is common in many cultures. In Japan, the Yurei are spirits that have been wronged in life and seek vengeance in death. Similarly, in Western folklore, the tale of the Headless Horseman from Washington Irving's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow features a ghostly figure seeking revenge. These stories, while chilling, reflect broader themes in folklore. The legends emphasize the importance of respecting burial sites and the deceased. The supernatural element of retribution is also a common motif, where the wronged seek vengeance from beyond the grave. And lastly, such tales often serve to reinforce moral behavior within the community, warning against actions deemed disrespectful or immoral. So the legend also remains a fascinating example of American ghost lore. While there is no concrete evidence to support the supernatural claims associated with his grave, the story continues to capture the imagination of those who hear it. Whether viewed as a cautionary tale, a reflection of cultural fears, or simply a piece of local color, the ghost of Carl Pruitt is a testament to the enduring power of folklore and the human fascination with the unknown. The legend of Carl Pruitt's ghost is a compelling example of how folklore can blend tragedy, mystery, and lessons in morality. Whether viewed as true accounts of the paranormal or just cautionary tales, these stories continue to captivate the imagination and serve as a testament to the enduring power of local legends. It's probably worth noting that eventually Pruitt's grave was strip mined for a new development, and to this day no one is really sure where it ended up.